Investigators documented the scene in the Catalina Foothills at dawn. More than 100 days after Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her home, court records show no suspect has been publicly named and no ransom has been collected. The official narrative suggests a violent abduction in Tucson, but the evidence everyone was focused on, it wasn't the real problem. The timeline issue pointed to a window they had all missed. If you want every development in this case as it happens, subscribe, because this story is still moving. Law enforcement established a perimeter around the residence immediately following the initial report. Forensic reports showed blood on the front porch, triggering an immediate escalation in the investigative response. We are now 4 months into the Nancy Guthrie case. Despite a $1.2 million reward and global attention directed by her daughter, Savannah Guthrie, the physical evidence trail appears to have plateaued. What remains is a digital and physical footprint that presents an entirely contradictory picture of the perpetrator. The central unanswered question is not simply who approached the home, but whether the sequence of events recorded on the security systems reflects a genuine kidnapping or a carefully constructed misdirection. Investigators confirmed the Ring camera was disabled at 1:47 a.m. Motion was not detected again until 2:12 a.m. That leaves exactly 25 minutes of unrecorded activity, combined with a total of 41 minutes the suspect reportedly spent inside the residence. To understand what happened during that time frame, you have to separate the financial motives from the forensic realities. But the narrative of a traditional ransom operation, it began to fracture almost immediately. Abductions involving an 84-year-old victim are statistically anomalous. When they do occur, they follow a rigid procedural timeline. A ransom demand is typically issued within 24 to 48 hours, with a rapid resolution expected in under a week. Every minute a captive is held increases the exposure risk for the perpetrator. Furthermore, a traditional kidnapping requires treating the captive with extreme care. The objective is to return the individual alive in exchange for financial remuneration. Yet the physical evidence at the Catalina Foothills property indicated something entirely different. The blood on the porch suggested an immediate, violent encounter. Why initiate a physical altercation with an elderly, fragile victim if the goal is a lucrative payout? Forensic analysis of post-offense behavior often differentiates between an instrumental motive, like financial gain, and an expressive motive, like a personal grievance. In an instrumental crime, the operation is meticulously planned. There is a clear objective. But when an operation is driven by a personal grievance, perpetrators often overcompensate. They attempt to construct a narrative in which an outsider commits the act, often referred to in forensic circles as an elimination murder. The objective is to remove an individual who presents an impediment to money, freedom, or a concealed truth, while attributing the act to a random intruder. But that is not what happened. The suspect took deliberate steps to obscure their identity, utilizing nearby shrubs to mask their approach before disabling the Ring camera. This suggests a perpetrator overprepared for the digital surveillance hurdles, yet fundamentally underprepared for the practical realities of managing an 84-year-old captive. The individual captured on camera exhibited a casual, almost buffoonish gait, displaying no visible anxiety. The demeanor was not that of a mastermind executing a high-stakes operation, but rather an operative carrying out a specific set of instructions. This discrepancy is precisely what forces a reevaluation of the entire timeline. The prevailing theory among behavioral analysts points towards a compartmentalized operation. There is the individual on the ground, and there is the architect who provided the intelligence regarding the camera locations and the property layout. The operation appeared to be proceeding according to a defined structure. Then investigators evaluated the contents of a specific communication directed to the family. The note stated that the perpetrator was sorry, but they did not anticipate that the victim would have a weak heart. The implication of that single document, do you think the suspect's handwritten note points to a targeted elimination, or does it confirm a ransom kidnapping gone completely wrong? If the next filing changes what we covered today, you will want to be here for it. The existence of the note fundamentally alters the legal trajectory of the investigation. From a procedural standpoint, if an arrest is ever made, that document serves as the foundation for a defense strategy. The argument will inevitably be framed as an accidental death during an abduction rather than a premeditated elimination. However, the psychology behind writing such a note to a prominent family is deeply contradictory. An individual capable of forcibly removing an 84-year-old woman in the middle of the night rarely experiences a sudden influx of sympathy regarding a cardiovascular condition. This contradiction introduces a secondary hypothesis. The note itself is an extension of the staging. To execute an operation of this magnitude and then seamlessly reintegrate into the local community requires a highly specific psychopathy. If the individual on the ring camera is a local worker or an associate, they would have to return to their daily routine, mask all fear, and conceal potential evidence without triggering suspicion. They would need a chameleon-like ability to compartmentalize the event. Yet the physical movements observed on the footage do not align with a sophisticated, cool-headed operative. This disconnect has led investigators to scrutinize parallel criminal patterns. Analysts recently evaluated a series of 72 wrench attacks documented globally, where anonymous individuals used the dark web or encrypted signals to recruit local operatives to target high-net-worth individuals. But applying that framework to Tucson presents statistical improbabilities. If the objective was purely financial, an operative whose plan fails typically pivots to an alternative method of securing funds. In this case, the silence has been absolute. Instead, the evidence points toward a perpetrator who possessed intimate knowledge of the victim's routine. An independent local kidnapper conducting basic surveillance would observe the victim's difficulty ambulating and immediately classify the target as too high risk. There are significantly more accessible targets within a 200-mile radius. The selection of Nancy Guthrie was deliberate. She was not a target of opportunity. She was the specific objective. The physical evidence was meant to tell one story, but the digital timeline revealed another. Investigators spent months analyzing the 41 minutes the suspect spent inside the residence. During that window, the property was ostensibly prepared to align with the abduction narrative. Blood was left on the front porch, evidence that forensic specialists note is relatively simple to stage if the fluid is obtained through alternative means. The perpetrator at the front door displayed no urgency because, theoretically, the primary objective had already been achieved. The case seemed to be locked into the timeline of a home invasion followed by an extraction. Until investigators reviewed the broader surveillance footprint regarding the vehicle. The ring camera was confirmed to be operational up until the moment it was physically destroyed. Yet during the time frame when the vehicle was supposed to have returned the victim to her garage, the camera captured nothing. What that absence of footage actually means, if the vehicle never passed in front of the operational camera to return to the garage, the possibility emerges that the victim never actually made it back to the house that evening. The 41 minutes spent inside by the operative may not have been an abduction at all, but a meticulous staging operation designed to explain her sudden absence. This hypothesis aligns with the profound silence from law enforcement. The restriction of public information is not indicative of an inactive case. It is the standard procedural posture for a homicide investigation. When investigators shift their focus from a live hostage scenario to a potential elimination murder, protecting the integrity of unreleased forensic findings becomes the highest priority. Releasing specific details can contaminate future witness testimony and compromise the prosecution's ability to verify a suspect's confession. The $1.2 million reward remains unclaimed. Criminal loyalty historically fractures when financial incentives reach that threshold, suggesting that the circle of individuals involved is exceedingly small, or that the operative possesses a legitimate fear of the architect behind the operation. Polygraph examinations have reportedly been utilized during the investigative process. However, passing a polygraph does not procedurally clear an individual. It merely provides a data point regarding their physiological response to specific questioning. The interviews conducted before and after the examination often yield more substantive intelligence than the charts themselves. The absence of a parasocial stalking trail further narrows the suspect profile. Individuals obsessed with celebrity proximity typically leave a documented history of contact attempts, letters, or physical appearances at filming locations. No such trail has been entered into the public record regarding Savannah Guthrie or her family. The next public briefing on the agency's progress is expected before the end of the fiscal quarter, when updated resource allocations will confirm if the task force remains fully funded. If formal charges are filed at the hearing scheduled for October 14th, the suspect's identity becomes public record. This is the third high-profile elderly targeting case in the broader Arizona jurisdiction in the past decade, though the forensic countermeasures deployed here remain unprecedented. The true capability of the perpetrator is not defined by what they took, but by the sheer volume of evidence they successfully manipulated. If this case matters to you, the next development is one you will not want to miss. Whether the digital forensics team successfully recovered the deleted geolocation data from the surrounding cell towers, and what devices were pinging near the Catalina Foothills that night, is a question the court filings have not yet answered.